The question of what is real stands among the most fundamental inquiries humans can make. It seems simple at first. Reality is what exists, what is out there independent of our thoughts and wishes. The world as it actually is, rather than as we imagine or desire it to be. But when we begin to examine this question more carefully, when we ask what it means for something to be real and how we can distinguish reality from illusion or appearance, the question becomes remarkably complex. Philosophers have grappled with the nature of reality for millennia, offering different and sometimes conflicting accounts of what truly exists and how we can know it. Our everyday experience suggests certain obvious answers. The physical world around us seems real. The chair you might be sitting on, the walls surrounding you, the earth beneath your feet. These appear to be solidly real, existing whether you think about them or not. Other people seem real, with their own thoughts and experiences independent of your awareness of them. Your own body seems real, a physical object that occupies space and persists through time. But even these apparently obvious realities become questionable when examined philosophically. How do you know the physical world exists beyond your perceptions of it? How can you be certain other people have inner experiences like yours, rather than being sophisticated automatons? How do you know you are not dreaming right now, or living in a simulation, or being systematically deceived about the nature of reality? These skeptical questions are not merely abstract puzzles. They point to genuine philosophical problems about the relationship between appearance and reality, between how things seem and how they actually are. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato made this distinction central to his philosophy, arguing that the world we perceive through our senses is not the ultimate reality, but rather a pale reflection or shadow of a higher realm of eternal, unchanging forms. According to Plato, what we see and touch and hear are merely appearances, imperfect copies of perfect templates that exist in transcendent reality, accessible only through rational thought. Consider a simple example from Plato's philosophy. You have probably seen many different circles throughout your life, drawn on paper, displayed on screens, formed by objects, but none of these circles is perfectly circular. Examined closely enough, every physical circle has irregularities, deviations from perfect circularity. Yet you recognize all of these imperfect circles as circles. How? Plato would say, it is because you have knowledge of the form of the circle, the perfect, eternal circle that exists not in the physical world, but in the realm of forms. Physical circles are circles only because they participate in or resemble this perfect form, and you recognize them as circles because your soul has prior knowledge of the form itself. This two-world metaphysics, this division between the visible world of changing physical things and the invisible world of eternal forms, shaped Western philosophy profoundly. For Plato, true reality consists of these forms, these perfect, unchanging archetypes that exist independently of the physical world. The forms are not just concepts in our minds or abstractions we create. They are real, perhaps more real than the physical objects we perceive, because they are eternal and unchanging, while physical things are temporary and constantly changing. The form of beauty exists whether or not any beautiful things exist in the physical world. The form of justice exists whether or not justice is practiced by any actual society. These forms are the ultimate reality, and the physical world is merely a shadow or reflection of them. Understanding why Plato held this view requires understanding his concerns about knowledge and truth. Plato believed that genuine knowledge must be of what is permanent and unchanging, because only what does not change can be known with certainty. The physical world is constantly in flux, constantly changing from moment to moment. The river you step into today is not quite the same river as yesterday because the water has changed. Your body today is not quite the same as yesterday because cells have died and been replaced. In a world of constant change, how can we have stable knowledge? Plato's answer was that genuine knowledge is not of the changing physical world, but of the unchanging forms. We can have certain knowledge of mathematical truths, of moral principles, of the nature of beauty and goodness, because these concern the eternal forms rather than the fleeting physical realm. This metaphysical vision has inspired countless thinkers across centuries and cultures. The idea that ultimate reality lies beyond the physical world, that what we see is not all there is, that truth can be discovered through reason rather than senses, has shaped religious thought, mystical traditions, and rationalist philosophies. But it has also been challenged and criticized, most influentially by Plato's own student, Aristotle, who developed a very different account of reality while studying at Plato's academy in Athens. Aristotle agreed with Plato that philosophy should seek to understand the ultimate nature of reality, the fundamental principles that explain why things are as they are. But he fundamentally disagreed about where to find this ultimate reality. For Aristotle, the forms do not exist in some separate transcendent realm. Reality is found right here, in the concrete individual substances we encounter in everyday experience. This particular horse, that particular tree, this particular human being, these individual things are what is most real. They exist in their own right, independently, and everything else exists only as properties or modifications of these primary substances. Aristotle developed his hylomorphic theory to explain the nature of these concrete substances. Every physical substance is composed of two principles, matter and form, which exist together in the unified individual thing. Matter is the material substrate, the stuff out of which something is made. Form is the structure or organization that makes the matter into a specific kind of thing. These are not two separate entities that somehow get combined. They are two complementary aspects of the one concrete substance, distinguishable in thought but inseparable in reality. This Aristotelian approach brings philosophy back to the observable world. Reality is not hidden in some inaccessible transcendent realm. It is here, in the natural world, we can observe and study. This does not mean that observation alone is sufficient for understanding reality. We must still think carefully about what we observe, must analyze the principles and causes that explain why things behave as they do. But the starting point is the world around us, not some invisible realm beyond it. Aristotelian philosophy thus became more empirical, more focused on careful observation and classification of natural phenomena, laying groundwork for the development of natural science. The contrast between Platonic and Aristotelian views of reality represents a fundamental divide in philosophical thinking, one that continues to resonate in contemporary philosophy. Are universals, the general properties or kinds that particular things instantiate, real in themselves, or do they exist only in particular instances? When we say two roses are both red, is there a real property of redness that both instantiate? Or is redness just a convenient term for similarity between particular red things? These questions about the reality of universals about whether abstract objects exist remain active in contemporary metaphysics. The development of modern science, beginning in the 16th and 17th centuries, brought new perspectives to questions about reality. The scientific revolution challenged many assumptions inherited from ancient and medieval philosophy, replacing them with a mechanical, mathematical understanding of nature. Reality, according to this new scientific worldview, consists fundamentally of matter in motion, governed by mathematical laws that can be discovered through systematic observation and experiment. This mechanistic view of reality was articulated clearly by philosophers like René Descartes, who argued that the physical world consists of extended substance, matter that occupies space and can be completely described in geometrical and mathematical terms. The qualities we perceive through our senses, colors, and sounds and smells, are not really in the objects themselves, but are effects these objects produce in our minds. The real physical world is colorless, soundless, devoid of all sensory qualities. It is pure extended substance, matter with shape and size and motion, but nothing more. This scientific view of reality created a sharp division between the objective physical world, describable by mathematics and accessible to scientific investigation, and the subjective realm of conscious experience, known only from within, irreducible to physical description. Descartes' substance dualism, his claim that reality consists of two fundamentally different kinds of substance, mental and physical, was one attempt to accommodate both the objective physical world revealed by science and the subjective experiences of consciousness that seemed irreducible to physical terms. But this dualistic solution created its own problems, particularly the problem of explaining how these two fundamentally different substances could interact. If mind and body are completely different in nature, sharing no properties, how can mental decisions cause physical actions? How can physical processes in the brain produce mental experiences? These questions have occupied philosophers ever since, generating numerous alternative theories about the relationship between mind and physical reality. Some philosophers responded by rejecting dualism entirely, arguing that only one kind of substance exists. Materialists held that only physical substance exists, that mental phenomena are really just physical phenomena, patterns of brain activity or functional states of physical systems. Idealists took the opposite approach, arguing that only mental substance exists, that what we call the physical world is really just ideas or perceptions in minds. Both of these monistic approaches avoid the interaction problem by denying that there are two different substances that need to interact. But each faces its own difficulties in accounting for the phenomena apparently eliminated or reduced. The nature of reality became even more puzzling with the development of quantum mechanics in the 20th century. Classical physics had described a deterministic universe of solid particles moving through empty space according to precise mathematical laws. But quantum mechanics revealed a stranger reality at the microscopic level. Fundamental particles do not have definite positions and velocities simultaneously. They exist in superpositions of multiple states until measured or observed. The act of observation itself seems to play a role in determining physical reality, collapsing the wave function and forcing indefinite quantum states into definite classical states. Different interpretations of quantum mechanics offer different pictures of reality. The Copenhagen interpretation suggests that quantum systems do not have definite properties before measurement. That reality at the quantum level is fundamentally indefinite or probabilistic. The many worlds interpretation proposes that all possible measurement outcomes actually occur, with reality constantly branching into multiple parallel universes. The pilot wave interpretation maintains determinism by positing hidden variables that determine outcomes. These competing interpretations make different claims about what is ultimately real, yet they agree on the mathematical predictions, making them difficult to decide between empirically. These developments in physics raise profound questions about the nature of reality. Is the world fundamentally deterministic or indeterministic? Do things have definite properties independent of observation, or does observation play a constitutive role in determining reality? Is reality discrete or continuous at the most fundamental level? Does time flow objectively, or is temporal passage merely subjective? Different physical theories suggest different answers, and philosophers continue to debate which features of our current best theories should be taken as revealing the fundamental nature of reality. The question of whether reality is fundamentally physical, whether everything that exists is ultimately made of matter and energy, as described by physics, remains contested. Physicalism or materialism holds that physical reality is all there is, that everything else, including consciousness and mental states, either is physical or depends on and arises from the physical. But critics argue that consciousness seems to have properties that cannot be reduced to or explained by physical properties, that there is an explanatory gap between objective physical descriptions and subjective conscious experience. This hard problem of consciousness challenges physicalist accounts of reality. Even if we had a complete physical description of the brain and nervous system, explaining all the functional and behavioral aspects of consciousness, it seems we would not yet have explained why these physical processes are accompanied by subjective experience, why there is something it is like to be conscious. Some philosophers argue this shows that consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality, not reducible to the physical, that reality includes irreducibly mental or experiential properties alongside physical properties. Others maintain that the apparent mystery reflects limitations in our current understanding and that future physical theories will be able to explain consciousness fully. The nature of time presents another deep question about reality. Time seems fundamental to our experience. Events happen in temporal sequence, one after another. Change occurs as things move from past through present into future. But what is time itself? Is it something real and objective, part of the structure of reality, independent of our experience? Or is it merely subjective, a way our minds organize experience without corresponding to anything in reality itself? Different philosophical theories offer different accounts. Presentism holds that only the present moment is real, that past and future do not exist. What was real no longer is, and what will be real is not yet. Reality consists only of what exists now. Eternalism takes the opposite view, holding that past, present, and future are all equally real, that reality is a four-dimensional block containing all of time. The present moment has no special metaphysical status, but only psychological significance as the time we are currently experiencing. The growing block theory tries to combine these, suggesting that past and present are real while the future is not yet real, that reality grows as time passes and present becomes past. These different views of time connect to questions about change and persistence. If only the present exists, how do objects persist through time? What makes something now the same object as something that existed in the past? If the past no longer exists? If all times are equally real, in what sense do things change or become? These questions about time's nature affect our understanding of reality's basic structure, of whether reality is three-dimensional or four-dimensional, of whether temporal becoming is objective or merely apparent. The question of what exists, of what kinds of things should be included in our inventory of reality, is called ontology. Different philosophical positions take different stances on what exists. Common sense realism holds that ordinary middle-sized objects like tables and chairs exist as real things distinct from the atoms that compose them. Reductionism argues that only fundamental physical entities like particles or fields are real, and that tables and chairs are not additional entities, but just convenient ways of talking about arrangements of fundamental particles. Similar questions arise about other entities. Do numbers exist? If so, where and how? They are not physical objects that occupy space. Yet mathematical truths seem to be discovered rather than invented, suggesting that mathematical entities have some kind of real existence. Do possible, but non-actual things exist? When we say that it is possible for you to be in a different location, are we referring to a real possible world in which you have that location, or is possibility just a way of talking that does not commit us to the existence of non-actual possibilia? Do properties exist as real things distinct from the objects that have them? When two apples are both red, is there a property of redness that both have, or is the similarity between them primitive, not requiring the existence of an additional entity? These ontological questions might seem abstract and removed from practical concerns, but they connect to how we understand science, mathematics, ethics, and other domains. If we are scientific realists, we believe that successful scientific theories describe reality as it actually is, that electrons and quarks and electromagnetic fields really exist. If we are instrumentalists, we view scientific theories as useful tools for making predictions without necessarily describing a real unobservable realm. This difference affects how we interpret science and what we think it tells us about reality. The relationship between language and reality raises further questions. Do our words and concepts carve reality at its joints, describing genuine divisions and kinds that exist independently of us? Or do we impose structure on reality through our language and conceptual schemes? Different languages classify colors differently, have different kinship terms, divide the natural world in different ways. Does this mean that reality itself is indefinite, taking on structure only through human conceptualization? Or does it just mean that different languages capture the same underlying reality in different ways? Some philosophers have argued for conceptual relativism, the view that what exists or what is real depends on what conceptual scheme we employ. In one scheme, there might be tables and chairs as distinct objects. In another scheme, there might only be fundamental particles in certain arrangements. Which scheme is correct? The relativist says there is no fact of the matter, that reality is relative to conceptual frameworks. Critics argue this leads to incoherence, that there must be some framework-independent reality that our different schemes attempt to describe, however imperfectly. The question of realism versus anti-realism arises in many domains. Scientific realism holds that mature scientific theories approximately describe a mind-independent reality. Anti-realism argues that scientific theories are tools for organizing experience without necessarily corresponding to a real, unobservable world. Moral realism holds that there are objective moral truths independent of what anyone believes or feels. Moral anti-realism denies this, arguing that moral judgments express attitudes or preferences without describing moral facts. Mathematical realism holds that mathematical objects like numbers and sets exist independently of human thought. Mathematical anti-realism argues that mathematical objects are human constructions or useful fictions. Each version of realism claims that a certain domain, whether scientific, moral, or mathematical, describes a reality that exists independently of our thoughts and practices. Each version of anti-realism denies this, offering alternative accounts of the domain in terms of human construction, social practice, or useful fiction. These debates about realism in different domains all connect to the fundamental question about the nature of reality and our relationship to it. The phenomenological tradition in philosophy approached reality by focusing on the structure of experience itself, rather than starting with metaphysical theories about what exists independently of consciousness. Phenomenology begins with careful description of how things appear to consciousness, how experience is structured. Edmund Husserl argued that we should bracket questions about the independent existence of the external world and instead study the essential structures of consciousness and how objects are given to consciousness. This does not mean denying external reality, but rather approaching it through the way it manifests in experience, rather than through speculative theories about what exists beyond experience. Martin Heidegger developed phenomenology in a different direction, arguing that the fundamental question of metaphysics is the question of being itself, of what it means for something to be. He criticized traditional metaphysics for treating being as just another being, the highest or most general one, rather than recognizing that being is what makes beings possible, the ground or horizon within which beings can show up as beings. Heidegger's project of fundamental ontology sought to recover this question of being and understand it through analysis of human existence, Dasein, the being for whom being is an issue. These phenomenological approaches suggest that questions about reality cannot be separated from questions about our relationship to reality, about how we are situated in the world and how the world shows up for us. Reality is not just a collection of objects existing independently. It is what appears, what manifests, what is disclosed in experience. This does not make reality subjective or mind-dependent in a simple sense. But it does suggest that understanding reality requires understanding the ways in which reality becomes accessible to conscious beings like us. Eastern philosophical traditions offer alternative perspectives on the nature of reality. Buddhist philosophy analyzes reality into momentary events or dharmas arising and passing away according to dependent origination. What we ordinarily take to be substantial things are really just conventional designations for patterns of arising and ceasing dharmas. The belief in permanent substantial selves and objects is the fundamental ignorance that causes suffering. Seeing reality as it actually is, as process rather than substance, as impermanent and interconnected rather than fixed and separate, is the beginning of liberation. Hindu philosophy in the Advaita Vedanta school teaches that ultimate reality is Brahman, pure consciousness or awareness that is the ground of all existence. The apparent multiplicity of individual selves and objects is Maya, illusion or appearance. The true self, Atman, is identical with Brahman. Realizing this non-dual reality, understanding that all apparent divisions and distinctions are ultimately unreal, is enlightenment. What seems like separate things in ordinary experience are really just manifestations of the one underlying reality. These Eastern perspectives challenge assumptions common in Western philosophy about the nature of reality and the self. They suggest that what appears as the obvious structure of reality, the division into separate things, the existence of a permanent self, might be construction or illusion rather than ultimate truth. Liberation or enlightenment comes through seeing through these appearances to the underlying reality, whether that is understood as impermanent interconnected processes or as non-dual unified consciousness. The question of what is real connects to questions about what we can know. Epistemology, the theory of knowledge, is intertwined with metaphysics, the theory of reality. Different views about reality suggest different accounts of how knowledge is possible. If reality consists of directly perceivable physical objects, then perception might be a reliable source of knowledge. If reality consists of abstract forms accessible only to reason, then rational intuition, rather than perception, is the path to knowledge. If reality is constructed through conceptual schemes, then knowledge is relative to those schemes rather than absolute. Skeptical arguments challenge whether we can know reality at all. How can we know that our perceptions match reality rather than systematically misleading us? Perhaps we are brains in vats, fed artificial experiences by computers. Perhaps we are dreaming. Perhaps an evil demon is deceiving us. These skeptical scenarios seem to undermine any confident claim to know reality, as it is independent of our experience. Different philosophical positions respond to skepticism differently, either trying to refute it, accepting it but limiting its scope, or embracing it and reconceiving what knowledge amounts to. The development of virtual reality and artificial intelligence raises new questions about reality. If experiences in virtual reality become indistinguishable from experiences in the physical world, does this show that reality is just whatever we experience, regardless of its source? If artificial intelligence systems behave indistinguishably from conscious humans, does this show they are conscious, have inner experiences, or could they be philosophical zombies, lacking inner experience despite perfect behavioral mimicry? These questions about simulation and artificial consciousness connect traditional philosophical problems to contemporary technological developments. The question of whether we might be living in a simulation has received serious philosophical attention. If it is possible, in principle, to simulate conscious beings and their world, and if advanced civilizations would run many such simulations, then statistically, it might be more likely that we are simulated beings than physical beings, because there would be many more simulated consciousnesses than physical ones. This simulation hypothesis raises questions about the nature of reality and whether we could ever know whether we inhabit a simulation or base physical reality. These considerations show that questions about reality remain active and contested in contemporary philosophy. There is no consensus on whether reality is fundamentally physical or includes irreducibly mental aspects. No agreement on whether universals or abstract objects exist. No settled view on the nature of time, causation, possibility, or properties. These ongoing debates reflect the depth and difficulty of metaphysical questions, the way that even our most basic assumptions about what exists can be challenged and defended with sophisticated arguments on both sides. Perhaps what matters most is not arriving at definitive answers to these questions about reality, but engaging seriously with them, understanding the different perspectives and arguments, recognizing how our assumptions about reality shape our understanding of knowledge, science, ethics, and human existence. The question of what is real is not just abstract metaphysics. It connects to how we understand ourselves and our place in the universe, to what we consider valuable and worth pursuing, to how we interpret our experiences and relate to others. The history of philosophy shows that views about reality have changed as knowledge and culture have changed. Ancient philosophers asked what the fundamental substance of reality is, proposing water or fire or atoms or forms. Medieval philosophers integrated these questions with religious concerns about creation and the soul. Modern philosophers grappled with how to reconcile the mathematical world of physics with the experienced world of consciousness. Contemporary philosophers address questions arising from quantum mechanics, neuroscience, artificial intelligence, and other developments. This historical progression suggests that our understanding of reality continues to develop and that future inquiry may reveal aspects of reality we have not yet conceived. Yet some questions seem perennial, arising in different forms across different historical periods. The question of whether ultimate reality is one or many, whether all diversity reduces to some underlying unity, or whether plurality is fundamental. The question of whether change is real or illusory, whether reality is fundamentally static, with change being merely apparent, or whether becoming is as real as being. The question of whether reality is fundamentally mental or physical, or neither or both. These questions recur because they address deep structures of thought and experience, reflecting tensions in how we make sense of ourselves and our world. The multiplicity of philosophical positions on the nature of reality might seem frustrating, suggesting that philosophy has made no progress. But perhaps the multiplicity reflects the genuine difficulty and complexity of the questions. Reality may be too complex, too multifaceted, too fundamental to be captured completely by any single theory or perspective. Different approaches may capture different aspects of reality, different ways in which things are or can be understood. The plurality of views may be a resource rather than a failure, providing multiple conceptual tools for making sense of different phenomena and different questions. The question of what is real remains as vital and as challenging as ever. It shapes how we interpret scientific theories, how we understand consciousness and experience, how we think about ethics and value, how we make sense of existence itself. Engaging with this question philosophically means thinking carefully about assumptions we usually take for granted, considering alternative possibilities, examining arguments and counter-arguments, recognizing that our ordinary understanding might not capture reality as it truly is. This philosophical engagement does not necessarily lead to certainty or consensus, but it deepens understanding and reveals the complexity and mystery of existence itself.